been able to see anything of what I was going to talk about. First of all, I stand here instead. If you could just take a look over the road, just to your left there, you will see a doorway with a blue plaque on the wall next to it. And if you can just about see that plaque, it says that Nell Gwyn lived in a house on that site in the late 1600s. Now, Nell Gwyn is the most famous of Charles II's mistresses, lovers, and she's also pretty much the first ever A-list celebrity in history. Now, to talk about how she got just so famous, we need to talk about what it is that Charles II actually got up to over in France. Over in France, Charles II was exposed to two things that he would never have come across here in England. The first of those things was Catholics. Over in France, of course, France is a Catholic country. There were lots and lots and lots of Catholics. But here in England, you would have been lucky to find anybody claiming to be a Catholic at all, because England had been a Protestant country for well over 100 years by the time Charles II was living over in France. Now, this dates back to that king I mentioned earlier on, King Henry VIII, the guy with the 6 wives. Now, when he married his first wife, England was still a Catholic country. They had a Catholic wedding. Everything was very lovely for several years afterwards. Henry and Catherine were living together quite happily. Until, after a few years, Henry decided he was bored. He wanted to divorce Catherine and marry somebody else. But because he's still Catholic, in order to get a divorce, he has to ask for the Pope's permission. So, he sends a messenger over to Rome. The messenger gets to Rome and says to the Pope, is it alright if Henry gets a divorce? And the Pope says, no, don't be ridiculous. Of course, you can have one wife like everybody else does. So the messenger comes back here to London and says to Henry, yes, sorry. The Pope said no. But Henry does not want to take no for an answer. He says, well, that's it. If I can't get a divorce within the Catholic Church, then there is just one thing possible. What I'm going to do now is break England away from the Catholic Church and set up my own church, the Church of England, where I can marry and divorce as many women as I want to. Well, that is exactly what he did. He set up the Church of England, a Protestant church, and he began to persecute Catholics in this country. Now, by the mid-1600s, this persecution had been going on for quite some time, and anybody who was still Catholic here didn't tell anybody about it. They kept it a secret. So, Charles II would probably have never met any Catholics at all here in London. However, of course, in France, he met lots and lots and lots of Catholics. He found many of them very attractive, and he made quite a few of them his mistresses. Now, there's another tour group about to try and walk past us. If you guys who are stood at the back there, just step right this way so they can get through. That would be great. Okay, so the other thing that Charles was exposed to over in France was actresses. Over here in England, if you went to see a play like Romeo and Juliet, let's say, then when Juliet came onto the stage, she would be played, of course, by a man wearing a dress, cleanly shaven, with a squeaky voice. Very moral, very sensible. That's how things should be. But over in France, you went to see Romeo and Juliet, and you never know. It was possible that when Juliet stepped onto the stage, she might be played by a woman. Can you imagine such a thing? The shock, the horror. But Charles II, he quite liked many of these actresses. He found many of them very attractive as well, and he made quite a few of them his mistresses. So when he came back here to England, he brought quite a lot of these women with him. Now, many of them were French, many of them were Catholics, and many of them were actresses, which at this point in time in London pretty much equals prostitutes. So these ladies were not very popular at all. All of them, that is, apart from Nell Gwyn, because Nell Gwyn was a bit different from the rest. She was English and she was a Protestant. So although she was an actress, she became incredibly popular here in London. In fact, she became one of the first actresses on London's stage. She became incredibly famous, and by all accounts, she was a pretty amazing woman. She, for one thing, managed to con about £2 million out of Charles II, enough to buy herself a house here on the most prestigious street in London. Pretty impressive for somebody who started off as a penniless actress. She also managed to persuade Charles II to make their illegitimate son a duke. So, bastard becoming a duke, pretty impressive again, the Duke of Burford. And then finally, she also was a pretty funny lady as well, a pretty witty lady. There are quite a few famous Nell Gwyn quotes. One of my favourites is how she was prowling down Pall Mall here one day in her carriage. Now, the people out here on the street, they knew that one of the king's mistresses was in that carriage, but they didn't know who was inside because all of the blinds were closed. They couldn't see through the window, but they assumed it was one of those hated Catholic mistresses. They started gathering around the carriage, shouting, "Bring out that whore! Bring out that Catholic whore!" You'd think that Nell Gwyn, sitting inside the carriage there, might be feeling a little bit nervous. I certainly would be. But no, he's perfectly calm, perfectly cool. He simply opens up the window, leans out, and says to the people, "Pray, be civil, my people, for it is I, the Protestant whore." As you can see, a pretty amazing lady indeed. Now, Nell Gwyn is not the only amazing woman remembered here on town. Now, there's another amazing lady remembered a bit further down the street. Her name is Florence Nightingale, and that's who we're going to go talk about now. So,